Hi guys, today we're starting our really big trig unit, really getting into those trigonometric ratios. So you may have heard your friends or you may have heard even your parents talk about something called Soh-Cah-Toa, and you may have asked yourself, what in the world is that? So today we're going to be introducing Soh-Cah-Toa, and we're going to be doing that by using the notes that we did last class. So let's just do a quick review on top. I gave you a triangle. And again, I gave you that angle over here. And we are going to identify those three sides: opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. So first, let's take a look at that blue angle. And I like to draw my arrow across because that side is the opposite side. And remember that in these, when we're talking about the opposite, we're just really talking about what side is across from that angle. Okay, now that I have my opposite side, I know I can identify my hypotenuse because that's across from that 90-degree box. It's also my longest side, so this guy over here is my hypotenuse. And even though there are no numbers to show that it's the longest side, it does look like it's the longest side. It's also across from that 90-degree. And then last but not least, there's the adjacent side. And adjacent in math with these problems really just means it's next to. Ooh, I did not spell that right. Adjacent. There we go. So again, adjacent just means that that angle is right next to that side. But I always identify the adjacent one last because I think it's the hardest one to find. Okay, so now that we've done that, we're going to get into our trigonometric ratios. So there are three of them that we are going to be focusing on, and three of them that are really the ones that we're going to focus on before we start getting into those other ones. So let's start with sine. Sine is spelled S-I-N-E, but we can abbreviate that just like it kind of has a nickname. So sine is actually just S-I-N. You'll see it written as most times. Cosine can be shortened to C-O-S for cos. And then tangent can be shortened to T-A-N, tan. So math people are pretty easy with their nicknames. They just use the first three letters of sine, cosine, and tangent. The ratios for these utilize those three sides that we used in the triangle above. So the way that I remember them is Soh-Cah-Toa, but the way that we actually teach them is by looking at those ratios. So sine is the ratio of the opposite side over the hypotenuse side. Now notice S, O, and H are all underlined with yellow writing. That's because we can write that as S-O over H, just to kind of abbreviate it. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. That's where you get the SO. Cosine is adjacent side over hypotenuse side. So to find the cosine of an angle, it's A over H. That's where the ca comes from. And then finally, tangent is opposite side over adjacent side, O over A, which is the toa, and that's where you get Soh-Cah-Toa, which you've probably heard before. So we're going to use that to help us with a bunch of these problems. And notice that I put that Soh-Cah-Toa right at the top of your paper, and I put it next to every example just to make sure that you have it next to you. It's not something that you'll have to memorize, but you'll probably get used to it as we go through them. So let's do example 1 together. It says, first, identify each side as opposite, hypotenuse, or adjacent. Good news is, we did a whole lesson on it last class, so we should be pretty familiar with identifying those sides. So we have angle A. Based on angle A, 4 is considered my opposite side. And based on angle A, 5 is considered the hypotenuse side. This is all that we did last class. Remember that the opposite is across from, Hypotenuse is the longest side because 5 is the longest side. And that means that 3 must be the adjacent because it's right next to that angle. It's also the last one that we're going to start putting them into sine, cosine, and tangent ratios. So sine, they said, was opposite over hypotenuse, O over H. So the opposite side is 4, and the hypotenuse side is 5. So sine is 4 over 5, and that's your answer, guys. It's that simple. Let's do cosine. Cosine is A over H, adjacent over hypotenuse. The adjacent side we said was 3 in our triangle, and the hypotenuse we said was 5. That's it. Done. And finally, tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the opposite side is 4, and the adjacent side is 3. 4 over 3 is my ratio. And that's it. Sine, cosine, and tangent based on your triangle. I really think it helps to just go ahead and label each of your sides before you put them into the ratios. Let's do problem number 2 together so you can get a better handle on this trig ratios. So number 2, again, let's always start by identifying that angle that we have in blue and then labeling our sides. So this time I have, and I'm going to use a different color, my opposite side across from angle B is 5, so I'm going to label it with an O. My hypotenuse, the longest side, is 13, so I'm going to label that guy with an H, just to shorten them, opposite, hypotenuse. And that means 12 is my adjacent side, so I'm going to label it with an A. Okay, now that we have our 3 sides labeled, we can go ahead and write our trig ratios. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 5. Oopsies. Opposite is 5 over the hypotenuse, which is 13. Done. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse. The adjacent is 12 over the hypotenuse, which is 13. Tangent, opposite over adjacent. Opposite is 5 over adjacent is 12. And that's it. We're done with that one. Okay, now please keep watching, even if you think you get it, because number 3 is a little bit different. So number 3, we're going to start the exact same way and label those sides. So based off of my angle, which is down here this time, I have the opposite side, which is 30, the hypotenuse side, which is 34, and the adjacent side, which is 16. And if you're still having trouble with the labeling, please stop the Zoom so that we can go over that from last class. Okay. Let's start with sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that would be the opposite, which is 30, over the hypotenuse, which is 34. Now, something that you might notice about this is that these two numbers can actually be simplified. Take a look back at examples 2 and 1 and notice that you can't simplify those fractions, but you can simplify 30 and 34 because the number 2 goes into both of them. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 2 just to simplify my fraction. So on top, 30 divided by 2 is 15. And on the bottom, 34 divided by 2 is 17. And that's my answer when I simplify my fraction, 15 over 17. You always want to make sure for every single problem, your answers are simplified. Let's do cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent is 16 over the hypotenuse, which is 34. Again, these are both divisible by 2. So let's divide the top and the bottom by 2. On top, when I divide, I get 8. And on the bottom, when I divide, I get 17. And 8 over 17 is the cosine of that angle. Finally, let's do tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Opposite, we said, was 30, and adjacent is 16. And because they're divisible by 2, we're going to divide the top and the bottom by 2. So on top I get 15, and on bottom I get 8. And 15 over 8 is the tangent of that angle. Again, make sure that you simplify every single one of your answers for all of these problems. They may not be divisible by 2, but they might be divisible by different numbers. So take a look for the biggest number that divides the top and the bottom of your fraction. Okay, as always, guys, I'm available on Zoom if you need any help. Thank you.